Well, Kelly, welcome.
Hi.
Welcome
I,
to
uh, I
the
I picked up
stage.
the last like 10 minutes of this conversation, and I feel like I really missed a lot in the previous minutes. Matt knows I had contractors here finishing up some repairs, and it was a race to the 12 o'clock hour to make sure that they were done. But it's interesting, the discussion around design thinking, and as it relates to this concept of the IT for business agility, because I've been thinking a lot since Matt called earlier and said, hey, would you come on this summit on Thursday and talk about IT for business agility? And I was thinking, what does that mean to me? What does it mean? And it's interesting because I started here at Villanova right 7 weeks before we all went remote, and we had all these plans and things we were going to do and projects we were going to pick up, and everything came to a screeching halt. And we spent a year really responding as much of an agile way as we could to solve, like many folks, I'm sure, to solve problems that were often induced by the remote working situation and ultimately ended up being IT related. And so we were extremely agile, and we had an extremely accepting audience. We didn't have to get it completely right. We just had to get it close enough and make their jobs, empower them to be able to, or enable them to be able to do their jobs. Now we're coming out of this, and it's really interesting because I think a lot of us have gotten that endorphin rush by being able to solve problems really fast and make people really happy and be the IT hero on campus. And now we're coming out of this, and we're saying, oh my gosh, we have to pick up all these other projects that we were doing. We've got to spend that time, and I think, to the point of the earlier conversation, doing that design thinking work and asking those questions, and put the pause on immediate solutioning and figure out kind of what are the options here? What are we growing toward? It's not an immediate fix anymore. And how do we create the situations for our customers that are not the immediate, but the longer term, maybe more costly, maybe more complex solutions? And I think that's where we're shifting in terms of agility now.
So it's interesting you use the word customer, right? Customer is such a taboo, and the word product. Like I'm a believer, and we're going to have disagreements. I already see people, disagreeing on the chat, which is exactly what we need in our world of higher ed, because we're not all going to disagree and disagree at the same time. But because I do look at students as a consumer, a customer, and a product that represents a university.
Mm-hmm.
So when we think about the agility coming,
Can I tell you why I call them customers though?
yeah, perfect.
Because our provost calls everybody that he serves in the academic arena as customers. And I was talking to him one day because I kept using the term constituents. And he said, I call all of the people that I serve out of my office, including faculty and students, customers. I like to think of myself as that kind of business mindset and providing a service to the campus. And I said, so you okay if I call them customers? He said, I'd love it. So of course he comes out of the business school, so it's probably not a surprise that he would think that way. But we kind of came to an agreement that we wanted to have that customer-centered mindset. So that's why I do that.
No, it's good. It's good. So, coming out of the pandemic, you were just triaging. I remember us having discussions about, hey, Matt, this is what's happening. And every school was triaging slightly different because their consumers were different. Your students, I remember having a discussion, your students were different. They were on campus, and they were the ones that, that had affinity to your campus, right? How do you serve them? Coming out of it, how do you start to thoughtfully engage with your customers, both the student, but your staff and faculty, to allow for you to serve differently coming out of the pandemic?
Yeah, Matt, that's the $1 million question right now, honestly. We just got some guidance here, I think it was last week, that we are all expected to be back in our offices working on August 1. In the past year, it's been folks who have customer facing, student facing roles, like our campus card office, some of our network folks that had to be on campus, the help desk people that have that are on campus with the walk-up areas. All of those folks have been on campus for this past year. But now the expectation is that everybody will be back on August 1st. And you just the oh my gosh, is that real? No way. We can't. What is that is palpable right now. And what's interesting is, of course, if you're reading the papers and the in the industry publications, and I'm talking to my peers and all of that. I mean, it's happening everywhere. We're all like, this can't be real. Like, we've been working remotely and we've been killing it for the year. Are we seriously expected to come back and sit in our chairs from 9 to 5? Like, that, what? And so I think the challenge that we're facing right now, industry wide, is how, we believe that a big part of the value that we bring is the in-person experience, that sense of community, that sense of service that we all share as being a part of the Villanova community. And that's all we've really ever known before the pandemic. I've worked in other industries where I've worked in a hybrid environment, and I've been able to deliver technology effectively, from my living room desk, from my, hoteling space in the company I work for, or, at a customer site. It didn't really matter. But we really come from an industry that, just believes that you have to be present to create that energy and that feeling and that sense of community. But what I think is happening, broader than just Villanova, is that this is a chance that some folks are hitting that fork in the road and saying, real estate's pretty darn expensive in my area. And boy, the salaries are pretty darn high in my metropolitan area. And I can hire somebody that's not in a major metropolitan city on a coast, and I can get really good talent. Can I go in that direction? And so I do see some of our peer institutions making decisions to classify jobs as, remote, as hybrid, looking at hoteling systems for both faculty and staff, and, figuring out how we take some of these lessons from the pandemic, carry them into the future, and still preserve our culture. So I think that is a big part, that we're looking, as an industry right now, at how do we do that? And we're looking around at all of our peers to say, who's going to do it first, and is it going to work? And, does it work in higher ed, as well as it might work at a company like Salesforce, right? And so these are the pressing issues that I think we're all grappling with at the moment.
So, the things that you talk about, real estate and space, and a little bit of a business mindset in how you have to think and be agile, right? In the chat, we have, I believe it was Todd. Todd, are you there? On your question in terms of higher ed has to embrace their identity, that they are somewhat of a business? Because I think you're going to get some challenges here from the academic side of the world too, right? Is that you have to think a little bit more like a business. Do you, as a leader running an IT organization, do you consider the way that you manage your staff, your space as a business?
That's a good question. That's a very good question. What comes to mind first is I tried to treat my staff as family. That's what comes first. Okay. But I also, as part of that, I try to, that comes with a sense of honesty and trust and candor that you have with your family, which I think is important in a business. And so for me, first and foremost, everybody that works for me, I think of them as family. But then I need to think about if somebody isn't performing, or if I need to give difficult feedback, because it's not good for the business, because it's not good for Villanova, I need to do that. So, I'm always thinking about, what's best for the university, and then how to layer that on top of, the folks that work in our area, and how I can continue to grow them and grow our effectiveness. So I don't know. That's a really good question.
Yeah. No, and this is why having the dialogue from the audience is so important, because things that we don't know, I didn't think about it that way. And when Todd wrote it, I was like, oh, that actually makes sense in some context. But higher ed always says we're different. we're not a business, right? And so some of it is this mind shift. You made a comment, and I'm wondering if, when you think about remote flexibility and people being elsewhere, a student's remote needs are going to be different than a faculty's remote needs. A staff's need is going to be different than, and also even the time, like when do they need to be remote? How often do they need to be on campus?
Mm-hmm.
What are the different levels of flexibility that remote has to do for those three customers? And then I want to then move to how do you use technology to address each of those uniquely but personally, right?
You know,
Yeah,
yeah,
broadly but uniquely. Yeah.
it's interesting, Matt, because I think I think one of the things that when I hear from people that they don't believe that we can have remote workers, I think one of the things that those people perhaps don't realize or don't use right now are the chat functions, like like Slack or Teams or the old Skype, right? And for us in IT, it is just second nature to just look at Teams, so and so's on it, bing bing bing, got the answer. I don't know if you're sitting 3 doors down from me or 3 miles down the road or 300 miles, right? It doesn't matter. I got you. We made progress. We moved on. And it's funny because I think the people that I talk to that are the most against being expanding into more of a flexible work arrangement, those are the people that I don't think ever log into those systems at all. I never find them on those systems and always have to call them on their wired phones, right? So I think that there is a change, not only in the pandemic in the way that people view their ability to get their work done from wherever, but I think that it also caused us to leverage technology in ways to build relationships and to get work done that probably differs by area on campus. And so to the extent that, perhaps people are more comfortable with those things, that might make a difference. I do think another issue in this whole, like, whether, if we're talking faculty, well, let's talk staff for a second. If you're talking about staff, I think the historical definition of working remotely has been, okay, we will over engineer this. We will have you sign an agreement. You will be 1 day a week. It will always be Fridays, and you will work from this hour to this hour, and that is that. And what happens with that kind of very rigid view of remote working is that there are times when the business, and I do use the term business, but the business of what you're doing, IT for the university, calls for an in-person meeting. It is really hard to do a strategic session over Zoom. I've tried. So you want to be in a room, you want to have a whiteboard, you want to do it. So we say, all right, hey Matt, let's do that meeting on Friday. Oh, sorry, that's my remote working day. Well, let's do it on Monday. Well, I'm sorry, Matt, that's my remote working day. And you go through the list of people that are going to attend, and by the time you find something that isn't someone's remote working day, it's 6 months down the road. I mean, it's just insane. So I don't like that historical definition of working remotely, because I don't think that helps you, ultimately advance what you're trying to do. And I think where we have to adjust is to be thinking about it as flexible, so that you know that you could be called into the office at any point. You wake up in the morning, you get ready, and if you get that call at 9:30 that there's a 10:30 meeting and everyone's got to be around the table, you better be there, right? But I just don't think that we even think that way yet. And I do think that I think the research will show this as well, that you get more productivity out of individuals when they have that kind of flexibility. I mean, Matt, you and I know, we both worked at Deloitte. Like we did this all the time, and at 10 o'clock at night, you hopped on, you got something done. And then, you just kind of moved your day around by, how you, where the work was, when it needed to get done, and you take a break for dinner and you didn't think about it for a couple hours. It just is the way that it is. So I think this is a culture change that we're trying to make here. As it relates to students and faculty, I think it's interesting. It's a slightly different issue. So at first, I was talking to some of my peers, and they were saying, oh, the faculty are saying that if staff are going to be remote, then we need to be able to be remote as well. And everyone's like, oh, well, I'm not sure we should all be remote teaching. What did our surveys say? Is that the best way to be teaching particular curriculum? And it kind of took a little bit of sort of digging into it to say, wait a minute, staff are asking to be like, faculty show up to teach their courses. They show up for their office hours. They may have some events on campus that they attend, but they're largely able to work from wherever, outside of those core commitments that require them to be on campus. And I think staff are looking for that same kind of flexibility. But now what's happening is the faculty are looking for, hey, we want to be able to teach from wherever. So they're kind of going the next bit. And I'll say that the messaging is mixed on how that went, in this past year. But I also think, from the students' perspective, it's really difficult to disentangle the impact of being stuck in your room all the time with a roommate who you may or may not like, dialing in or connecting into classes, not having a real robust social life, and being sort of restricted in your movement, as maybe not the best college experience you've ever had, or maybe not the one you envisioned. But if we can get back to where you've got students enjoying and their social lives and engaging with people on campus and meeting folks and things like that, and then start to look at ways to really hone in on optimizing that balance of remote, blended, asynchronous learning and in-person learning, I think we can find that balance. I anticipate we're going to swing all the way back to in-person and try to recreate this pre-pandemic experience. I do think we will see some resistance, revolt, from students who say, I've got one, he's on the other side of his wall, he's a freshman in college, and he's like, oh my gosh, if they don't let me take some things asynchronously, I'm going to go crazy, right? I love the asynchronous learning. So I think we're going to, in the freedom that it gives the students, I think we're going to get a revolt that kind of pushes us somewhere into the middle. But it's going to take us a little while to get there. And I'm hoping that same kind of conversation happens around how can we find the right balance in terms of on campus and off.
Yeah, this has been good. So I see a lot of chat. Hey, Mark, it's good to have a Deloitte alum here in the house. So that's good. So really quick, this has just been a really fascinating discussion. I'm a big believer, and I do future of work and future of learning for universities. And when I think about future of work and reimagining the campus enterprise, I actually ask the question, what is structured activities? What are unstructured activities of that office? And based on the structured activities, those are rule-based things that happen all the time. It is sequential. Like you could put some sort of automation, and my friend Ali is in the house, that puts AI into the play of RPA and automation, and allow for those people that are sitting in a cubicle typing in things to be able to then stop doing that, have more capacity for the real critical, the unstructured thing, which is critical reasoning, the body language, meeting with students, walking them through, asking them how their day is going. How does your office look at becoming agile using the newer technologies like this to take away some of those things? And I would say that's from a workforce element. But in learning, you have to do the same exercise. What content is repeated? What things can we put on video? What needs to be a student interaction in a classroom setting or in a lobby or in a workplace? Or I would love your thoughts on that, because I think there's an agility issue that if you use the technologies today, and a lot of our technology systems are using AI behind the scenes, but we don't go and jump in and use it. Would love your thoughts on that. Others definitely chime in, but I wanted to get to that if we could.
Yeah, and honestly, it's something that I've been thinking a lot about as it relates to our technology support area. We, I think we've and I know other institutions are doing this and doing it really well, but I also think there are probably a fair number of institutions that find themselves exactly like we are, where we've grown a support organization that just really loves that personal contact and feels really good when they close a ticket and they look at the day and say, I closed 50 tickets. That's awesome. And to me, it's like, I don't want 50 tickets. I want 5 tickets. And you close 5, that's great. But we haven't, we're now trying to shift that mindset within our support organization, that the self-service component, the more that you allow people to solve their own problem and the less people that actually have to talk to you to solve that problem, the better. And at first it was kind of this discussion around, well, then I need more people, I need more people, I need more people. And it was like, no, you need different ways of doing what you're doing. And one of those things you can look at is technology. And it sort of hit the organization recently. That team was like, oh, chatbots, AI, yes, exactly. And we have other things that we need to do. We've had some antiquated systems that haven't allowed us, for example, to record your help desk message to say, press 1 for a listing of all known outages. And we're upgrading that technology behind the scenes and things like that. But I really think that is the key, is for folks to really grasp that concept of, we have to do more proactively and move towards self-service with less. So that is where we're really trying to embrace AI and bring that to campus.
In the audience, there was a comment, I believe it was from Jennifer, that talked about her, I think, high school, that their students would want to go. Everyone thinks that they want to go on campus, but they're now volunteering, saying, hey, can I get a virtual day here? Like this flex element of, hey, I just need to work from home today. I can probably do that. I presume, our staff is the same way. Like, are there times that you could be flexible in the way that you allow a little bit of autonomy to your staff? Now, I know that there's the O suite, the operational people, because of the interaction with students, the fact that people need to be there is an important piece. How do you use Flex in your agility ecosystem in terms of IT and the business, of making your space competitive in terms of supporting your customers with a person there, but still having the agility of your folks maybe wanting a little bit of the asynchronous world that they like to get into at some point in time?
Yeah, and that's honestly, Matt, I think we're really at the beginning of that conversation. And for me, I saw it fly through the text chat, the culture eats strategy for lunch comment. I think really what it comes back to for us is that there still is not a universal belief or faith that you can build a strong culture using technology and allow people flexibility to work from wherever. And that the only way that we can achieve the desired culture is to be in person. And so I think there's an interesting opportunity to study higher ed as an industry, because I do know of some universities that are moving toward that embracing of the hybrid worker. I do know of a university that's already put faculty into hoteling, which I was like, wow. Those things I think we need to study, and we need to look at the impact on the culture. How do we measure that? How do we evaluate whether it has suffered, whether it has changed for the better, for the worse? And if we really truly are different than other industries, then let's study ourselves and start talking about how we create that university of the future that allows workers that kind of flexibility, whether it be the faculty, the staff, and even the students.
So what strikes me, I know we're coming up on the end here though, is, and because this is something I've been thinking a lot about for a while now, even going back almost a decade. How do you think about the engagement model, and in my case, then the platforms and the underlying IT for a campus, for the student experience, for the constituent experience? It could extend from applicants or parents of applicants all the way to corporations and continuing education. but there's been up until this point in the forcing function of COVID, there really hasn't been a lot of systemic thought about the engagement model for the entire community. And what does that mean? Because I think of it's really more of a continuum. In that way, you can say, well, what are some of the tools we have? There is a difference between teaching, I think, conveying, whether it's online or in person, versus a point of service from an admin person. And it depends on a lot of factors of the institution, the mission, et cetera. So I'm struck by, is now the time to start thinking about an engagement platform that is holistic for the campus community, real and virtual.
Mark, I like where you're going with that. It goes back to that age-old concept of the consumerization of IT and the fact that, that's how we're used to engaging with people outside of this little microcosm. I mean, I was on the helpline this morning, texting with Verizon over a data pack issue on my phone, right? And I don't want to pick up the phone. I didn't want to have a call, and so we haven't replicated that kind of engagement universally across campus for all those constituencies. As a parent of a freshman, I wanted to ask a question of my son's university around housing contracts for students who weren't there in their first year, couldn't get through the big wall of the website to find the person, right? And so you're right, we have as a parent, as a consumer, I had a struggle with trying to get to where I wanted to be. And I do think our students would love more consistent opportunity to engage that way, in a way that they're comfortable with, perhaps leverages existing, iOS or Android level kinds of texting that they're used to, and integrates that into a larger platform would be a win.
Well, I wonder too, if that gives us a bit of an abstraction to have a larger conversation about efficacy of the various engagement models. And I'm going to use a real stretch analogy just for a second. I don't know if any of you remember Quibi, the big mobile platform that billions were spent to produce all of this content that we were all going to be watching while we stood in line. Oh, whoops, we're not staying in line anymore, so that's an issue. But and most of you may not remember because it went away, and it was killed by TikTok. And that's just not my view. A lot of folks, a low fidelity, refer to it however you want. And so I've had conversations with folks. My previous role, talking to a lot of institutions that maybe have big media studios and things like that, and I was struck by how some of them, particularly in places like Latin America, were kind of shutting them down. It was like, there's no point, because the most compelling thing that's being done is generally being shot on someone's mobile phone of the moment. And so that idea of scoring the engagement for the right audience at the right time, to me feels like we've tried some things, and now maybe is the time to start, I don't know, I guess scoring it and say, well, what, so that then I'm back to IT, because you're running IT and you're like, well, what do I need to do? Where do I need to invest in my operational models and the technology to actually realize the objectives of the institution? That's got to have become a much more difficult thing to ascertain today. So I'm curious what you think about that.
It's the chicken and the egg problem for me. Like, how much do I invest if I don't have total buy-in that something like that is really that we even need to transform? I mean, and so I think that we probably need to think about like that change management campaign around the need to think differently and to engage differently, and sort of make that case collaboratively with the vendor community to arrive at something that demonstrates. But I think right now it just feels like, unfortunately, it feels like a step too far, right? So how do we bridge that?
So really quick, I know if you can just give us a little bit more time, and we're going to go to QA, and we're going to have just a dialogue, because that's what our break period. We don't really like to take on more than 90 minutes. Otherwise people so we kind of use this, we'll eventually have a QA, and people that want to stay can hang out. I'm going to go get some coffee. So really quick, just so you guys know, we have put Quiller out there for you guys on the chat. Definitely look for it. There's Kelly's information, thoughts, things that she texted me, and I kind of put it in there as the dialogue, which has been great. Me and Kelly are just good friends, and so we have that ability to do that. So really quick, Ali, you asked a question, and I kind of want to just set this up, and if you want to ask it, we have future work in front of us, Kelly, meaning
Mhm.
the jobs of the future are going to change. The fact that AI is going to come in and do something differently. The half skills of what we do today are going to expire very quickly. Ali, I'm not going to take your thunder, but do you want to just ask your question to Kelly?
Sure, Matt. Thanks for the opportunity. And before I do that, let me thank you again for giving me this opportunity to be among such distinguished people. This idea has been going on, and I'm just, I've learned it from you guys. And like you said, the half life of the skills have been reduced from 26 years down to maybe less than 2 years now. And looking at how fast technology is changing the jobs and the skills that you need for the new market, it seems that universities have to be the accelerators of the future, the incubators of the future. And this transformation from where they are right now to that future is not going to be that easy. There will be a lot of friction. And like Matt mentioned, the 4 years long degree, although it's necessary to give students a sense of inclusiveness and to be like an oasis for students to feel they belong to a community, but then it seems that 4 year long is not necessary. You can break it down to intensive crash course like periods where you can train them for 12 months, then let them go, come back maybe after 2, 3, 4, 5 years maybe, then go through another crash course, and then another after another 4 years. And these periods can be delivered by multiple entities, multiple institutes, courses coming from different places. And this is a possibility. And going from where we stand right now to that possible future seems to be, I don't know, a tall order. So how do you envision this mutation in DNA of higher ed? Thank you. This is Ali. I'm done speaking.
I'm not sure how much we've mutated yet. I think that's what we've got to figure out. And I don't think we're going to know. I don't think we're going to know this fall. I think we're going to figure out sort of our new homeostasis somewhere in the next year. And I watch a lot of these challenges getting lobbed at us, and we say, we respond immediately from the place of, I think somebody said the Middle Ages. We respond from our middle-aged mind. Or we just say, no, we don't do it that way. We've never done it that way, right? And then we get, more of this sort of campus swell around, but why? But what? That's what's changed. The campus swell on, really kind of pushing the conversation and having the discussion. We're just getting that campus swell now about what are we going to look like next year. We've been dealing with problem after problem. I mean, nobody knew how to solve any problem that got lobbed at us over this past year, or no one could even predict the rapidity and rate of the problems being thrown at us over the last year. And we responded. But one of the things I would see is that we would often respond in one way and then adjust and come at a very different conclusion at the end once we had all weighed in. So I think we're just at the beginning of that process right now. And I do think you'll probably see different degrees of sort of willingness and tolerance for risking new ways of operating. And the more some of those people, and doesn't have to be the Ivies, it just has to be someone that that an institution views as like them or competitive to them in their areas, and we start to see them do things and go, that's interesting. Can we make that work here? And we start to talk with others, and because that's who we are. We're a collaborative industry. But I think we have to. I think we have to come back at that question in a few months and say, okay, where are we landing? But Matt, you're on mute. saying genius things, I know.
There you go. There you go. No, this has been great. And I think we got to look at the future of work in terms of the half skills of retraining your staff, keeping them prepared, having them in the right dialogue with the right people. Because right now there's a webinar and they listen to it. There's no engagement there. So I always say, we need these multi-directional conversations. That's why, if you notice, I'm on Clubhouse right now because we're always trying to get this conversation going. So anyone that wants to join us in Clubhouse, I'll just follow us and we'll get you in. But I do think what we're doing in Clubhouse, we just ran a conference, Kelly. We started the ideation 8 weeks ago, ran it. We designed it in 7. There's people like Deborah is on here. Within like 7 weeks, we had 170 sessions. We had 6 continents, speakers from everywhere, multi-languages to dialects from each of the languages. Like, we did that so fast. That's how agile we are. And how do we do it? We used Google Docs. We used visual presentations to send things. We put collaborative spaces together. Slack was used. And so now I'll be honest, the CIOs and even the presidents, I was with the president yesterday, and I said to her, what's your Clubhouse strategy? What is your strategy to do things of today? And then ironically, she was on Clubhouse that evening. And I said to her, let's think about it. You don't have to go use Clubhouse, but let's start thinking about all the things that Clubhouse is doing to make people engage with just voice, right? Any final thoughts? I just threw that out there, and then I'm gonna pause. We'll let the guys who cut the video do that, and then we'll move from there. So Kelly, I want to say thank you for joining us. I know this is like fast and furious. I told you, you just have to come as you and talk. So I appreciate that. Any thoughts as we close out?
Unless anyone else has any other questions.
Any questions for Kelly?
Can I have a follow-up?
Yeah, go ahead, Ali.
So an idea, it's very raw though. So do you think that future of higher ed can deliver programs like Costco membership where you can enroll and then earn new degrees through crash course every few years or every few months, if you will?
It's interesting. I've heard that. I've actually heard it like the Netflix model, but same kind of thing where you kind of subscribe to a university for a period of time and just take some stuff and then check out. Honestly, I think the human behavior generational kind of research would suggest yes. That I think we're going to see some of that demand coming out of the generation of students that we're bringing through into the college environment now, where they've grown up with the Khan Academies, they've grown up with information at their fingertips, and there will need to be some things that change, I think, in the industry to kind of pivot toward a value, a certificate that is of value to employers. Does taking a course on LinkedIn Learning mean the same thing as taking a course with a similar title from Villanova University, right? And so how do you create value in those credentials and those certificates? But I think looking in my little crystal ball, I do think that students are going to want something like that, and I think we should be challenging universities, especially as they're trying to grow into online areas and to try to do it innovatively, to think about how to engage a whole other segment of their market. We have such a strong, for example, alumni network here at Villanova. It's incredible. And leverage that to say, come back home. Like, even if it's over computer, and take some courses and subscribe to it. I think that is something that could have legs for sure.
Actually, can I just to share on that point, Kelly, because to me this is an important one, is we're all lifelong learners. I mean, based on everything we're talking about and all, right, the pace of change. So what better way to engage with your alumni we already know the degrees because we gave them the degrees. And if their degree is one that's being predicted to potentially be moved out of favor, right? Or, we could at least, so be able to serve up to folks that paid their good money to come to us in the first place and share with them, listen, based on research, this is a future direction, something you may be interested in. We happen to have these 2 or 3 courses or this certificate. Keep them ahead of the curve versus reacting after the fact. I think of mainframe programmers in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. How great would it be for them to have had that before their skills became obsolete?
And sometimes the models have evolved out of partnerships with companies instead of individuals. And so there's a shift to be made there as well. It's not that you have to have an agreement. I'll use Deloitte since that Matt and I both came from Deloitte at one point. That Deloitte might have an agreement with a company to, hey, I'm making the certificate program available and it's blessed by Deloitte that it will, give you some sort of benefit in your job at Deloitte. But I think that the shift also needs to be made to, you no longer need to think about it only as a corporate investment, but as an investment in individuals to stay committed to that learning at your institution versus just broadly.
Yeah,
and it impacts donations.
For sure.
Yeah, so this is great. So we're going to transition into this, what we call a Q&A lounge. I'll invite people that are that have gotten pretty during this time to turn on cameras and come on stage or just talk. Kelly, I don't know what your schedule is, but would love for you to be here if you have because there's a lot of dialogue going on right now, and I'd love to hear any questions that people may have. I see my TribeX team in the house. I see Adrian and Raphael. I don't know if you guys could jump on, but it's really just a fun time to just have some dialogue like this. So any questions? I know, Lindsay, you had a question that you said we're not going to be able to answer it today in terms of culture and social. I don't know if you want to just ask that to drive some of the discussion here.
I feel like I had a lot of questions that a lot of topics. Do you remember which one it was?
It was the one that you talked about. Higher ed is impacted by the social element, the society elements of it, the restrictions of that, and how we have to maybe think slightly different. That was one of them.
Like my personal focus right now, I'm also 17 years working in higher ed, but I'm also going back and getting my master's. My master's is focused on security technology, but so a lot of my kind of mindset right now is in the critical infrastructure space of our economy and our nation. But I feel like higher education underpins everything we do. And so from a societal standpoint, COVID has really upended a lot of things. And so how are we gonna come out of it? I think our culture is changing. I don't have an answer, but I'm enthralled and I am eager to learn from other people and just listen to how what people think on it.
Any thoughts on what Lindsay's saying? Anybody?
Hopefully I got that across fine, Matt. I don't know.
So, I think just from when I was looking at it, I think this higher ed is part of the whole societal element, and we got to figure out how to merge it together. There's an industry connection that I think we're going to have to get to. Higher ed can't stand on its own anymore as we are the entity. I think there has to be a relationship with society. One of the things that I always say is higher ed struggles with their identity as to who they are, what the purpose of it is. I think some of that has to be decided and driven by a discussion there. So that's what I would add here. So Raphael, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Sorry, stepped outside here. Got the baby and grandma inside. This whole working from home has just been a blessing. I know some of us are feeling stressed, but I keep trying to remind myself that it's time that I will remember fondly. So just glad to be here. I love all of the conversation. The conversation is great because it's happening everywhere. It's happening on Zoom. It's happening on Clubhouse. We know it's happening amongst administrators and teachers. It's just really great to be a part of this. I think the watching what the growth is going to look like and where it's going to come from I think it's going to be pieces from all places, whether it's the security side, which is going to be addressed, sort of the a la carte Netflix membership model is definitely something that I think we're going to have to cater to the generation that's had that. You know, people want to be interested in something for 2-3 years and then build on a skill and expand because they see a new opportunity. And I think if we can't capitalize on that, the schools are going to have a real hard time retaining some of those longer term students that would do, you know, previously an undergrad and then maybe a master's or a PhD. I think people are going to want to be able to do 2 years here, and then whatever school is deciding to pivot in the direction of what they're passionate about now, they want to do another 2 years there and have some sort of a credential that they can take that's universally recognized, that they can leverage. So just thank you for being here. I'm Raphael, and I'm done speaking.